The rain-slicked streets of Seattle gleamed under the sodium glow of streetlights, but for Elias, the world was a blur of heartbreak and shame. He stumbled out of the upscale bar, the sting of Caleb's words. "You're just a heat toy, Elias. Nothing more," cutting deeper than the autumn chill. At 28, Elias had thought he'd found something real with Caleb, the charismatic alpha who'd swept him off his feet, only to shatter his heart in front of a crowd of strangers. Elias clutched his jacket tighter, his lean frame shivering as he navigated the bustling Pike Place market, its vendors closing up for the night. The scent of fresh fish and coffee lingered, but it couldn't drown out the memory of Caleb's cold smirk, the way his hazel eyes had glinted with disdain. Elias, a black omega with a quiet strength and a passion for poetry, had spent months believing Caleb saw him as more than his biology. He'd been wrong. He found refuge in a small cafe, its warm lights a stark contrast to the storm in his chest. Sitting at a corner table, Elias scribbled in his notebook, pouring his pain into words. "My heart is a cracked vase, leaking love I can't hold." He was an omega in a world that often reduced him to his heats, his ability to bear children for an alpha. Caleb, a 30-year-old Latino architect with a magnetic presence, had seemed different until tonight. Elias had confessed his feelings, baring his soul in a moment of vulnerability, only for Caleb to laugh, his voice dripping with cruelty. "You thought I'd make you? An omega like you?" The words echoed, each syllable a knife. The cafe's barista, a kind-eyed woman named Marla, slid a mug of chamomile tea across the counter. "You look like you need this," she said softly. Elias managed a weak smile, his dark eyes glistening. He wasn't just grieving a rejection. He was mourning the dream of a future where he was enough. As an omega, society expected him to seek an alpha's bond, to submit. But Elias had always wanted more, a love that saw his soul, not just his scent. Days turned into weeks, and Elias threw himself into his work at a local bookstore, finding solace among the shelves. His best friend, Jamie, a 27-year-old non-binary artist with a shock of blue hair, tried to lift his spirits. "Caleb's a jerk, Eli. You're a freaking poet, a dreamer. You're worth 10 of him." But the ache lingered. Elias couldn't shake the memory of Caleb's touch, the way his calloused hands had felt so safe, until they pushed him away. One evening, as Elias closed the bookstore, his body betrayed him. A familiar warmth curled in his core, the first signs of a heat. Omegas were rare, their cycles unpredictable, and Elias had always managed his with suppressants. But tonight, the pills were at home, and the sensation was overwhelming. He hurried through the streets, his breath shallow, when a familiar scent stopped him cold. Sandalwood and cedar, unmistakably Caleb. Caleb stood under a street lamp, his flannel shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his expression unreadable. "Elias," he said, voice low, almost a growl. "You shouldn't be out here like this." Elias's heart raced, torn between anger and the primal pull of his heat. "Leave me alone," he snapped, but his voice trembled. Caleb stepped closer, his alpha presence intoxicating. "I messed up," Caleb said, his eyes softer now, but Elias didn't trust the shift. "You called me a toy." Elias shot back, his fists clenched. "You humiliated me." Caleb's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he offered to walk Elias home, his tone laced with something Elias couldn't place, regret, maybe, or something darker. Against his better judgment, Elias let him. The walk was silent, charged with unspoken words. When they reached Elias's small apartment, Caleb lingered at the door. "I'm sorry," he murmured, but Elias shut the door before he could say more. Alone, Elias sank to the floor, his heat intensifying, his heart a battlefield of longing and rage. The next morning, Elias woke to a feverish haze, his heat in full force. He called in sick, barricading himself in his apartment with suppressants and poetry. But Caleb's apology haunted him. Why had he shown up? Why now? Elias didn't know that Caleb had been watching him for weeks, wrestling with his own demons, an alpha's pride, a fear of vulnerability, and a pull toward Elias he couldn't ignore. As Elias's heat subsided, he made a decision. He wouldn't let Caleb define him. He enrolled in a poetry workshop, pouring his pain into verses that resonated with others. At a reading event, he met Sam, a 29-year-old trans man with a gentle demeanor and a passion for photography. Sam's warm brown eyes and easy laugh drew Elias in, a spark of hope after months of darkness. They talked for hours, sharing stories of their lives, Elias's dreams of publishing, Sam's love for capturing raw human moments. But Caleb wasn't done. One night, as Elias and Sam left a gallery opening, Caleb appeared, his eyes dark with something primal. "You're moving on already?" he asked, his voice tight. Elias stood his ground, Sam at his side. "You don't get to claim me," Elias said, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. Caleb's gaze lingered, a storm brewing behind his eyes, before he turned and vanished into the night. Elias thought that was the end. He was wrong. Elias's life began to bloom again, like spring breaking through Seattle's gray winter. His connection with Sam grew, their dates filled with laughter and quiet moments that felt like home. Sam, with his steady presence and knack for seeing beauty in the mundane, was everything Caleb wasn't: gentle, open, human. They'd spend evenings at Sam's loft, where Elias read poetry while Sam edited photos, their worlds blending seamlessly. Yet, Elias couldn't fully shake the shadow of Caleb's rejection, the way it had carved doubt into his heart. One rainy afternoon, Elias felt off: nausea, fatigue, a strange sensitivity to smells. He chalked it up to stress, but Jamie, ever perceptive, dragged him to a clinic. The doctor's words hit like a thunderclap. "You're pregnant. Twins." Elias's world tilted. Omegas could conceive during heats, but he'd been careful, or so he thought. The memory of that night with Caleb, when his heat had overwhelmed him, flashed back. They hadn't, but the timing was too close. Panic clawed at him. He hadn't seen Caleb in weeks, hadn't wanted to. Now, his body carried a truth he couldn't escape. Elias confided in Sam, expecting judgment. Instead, Sam took his hand, his voice steady. "We'll figure this out together, Eli. Whatever you choose." Elias's eyes burned with tears. Sam's acceptance was a lifeline, but the weight of the pregnancy, and Caleb's potential claim, loomed large. Omega's children were often seen as Alpha's property in their community, a tradition Elias despised. He wanted to raise his twins free from that shadow, but he knew Caleb wouldn't let go easily. Word spread fast in Seattle's tight-knit Omega Alpha circles. By the time Elias was 3 months along, Caleb found him. It was at a farmer's market, where Elias was buying apples with Sam. Caleb's scent hit first: sandalwood, cedar, undeniable. He looked different, his flannel traded for a tailored coat, but his eyes held the same intensity. "You're pregnant," he said, not a question. Elias froze, Sam stepping protectively closer. "It's mine, isn't it?" Caleb's voice was low, possessive, and Elias's stomach churned. "They're mine," Elias snapped, his hand instinctively cradling his barely there bump. Caleb's gaze darkened, a mix of anger and something softer: regret, maybe, or desperation. "We need to talk," Caleb said, glancing at Sam with barely concealed disdain. Sam, unflinching, said, "He doesn't owe you anything." The tension was a live wire, and Elias felt trapped between two worlds: his past with Caleb and the future he was building with Sam. Caleb backed off that day, but he didn't disappear. He started showing up at the bookstore, leaving notes tucked into Elias's favorite poetry collections. I was wrong. Let me make it right. Elias tore them up, but each one chipped at his resolve. He didn't want Caleb's apologies. He wanted to be free. Yet, the Alpha's persistence stirred old feelings, memories of stolen kisses and late-night talks before everything soured. Elias hated himself for wavering, but biology was a cruel tether. Sam noticed the shift. One night, as they cooked dinner in Elias's tiny kitchen, Sam set down his knife and faced him. "You're not over him, are you?" His voice was gentle, but the hurt was clear. Elias's heart cracked. "It's not that," he said, struggling to explain. "It's the twins. He's their alpha. I don't know what that means for us." Sam nodded, his jaw tight. "I'm here, Eli, but you need to decide what you want." The conversation ended with a quiet hug, but Elias felt the distance growing. Meanwhile, Caleb's pursuit intensified. He sent gifts, baby clothes, books on omega pregnancies, each one a claim Elias rejected. But one evening, Caleb cornered him outside the bookstore, his voice raw. "I was scared, Elias." The next weeks were a storm of emotions. Elias's pregnancy became visible, drawing stares and whispers. Jamie, ever loyal, helped him navigate the judgment, but Elias felt exposed. He loved his twins already, their tiny heartbeats a melody in his ultrasounds, but the question of Caleb lingered like a ghost. Sam remained a rock, but Elias sensed his fear of losing him, of being second to an alpha's bond. One night, Elias found a letter slipped under his door. Caleb's handwriting was unmistakable. "I'm not giving up. Not on you, not on them." The words were a promise and a threat, and Elias's resolve hardened. He wouldn't let Caleb control his future. But as he lay awake, feeling the twins move, he wondered if he could truly escape the pull of the alpha who'd broken him, and the part of him that still ached for what they'd lost. Elias's world was a tightrope, and every step felt like it could send him plummeting. At 5 months pregnant, his body was a map of change, his belly round, his energy sapped, his heart torn. Seattle's spring brought cherry blossoms and hope, but Caleb's shadow loomed larger. Elias wanted to build a life with Sam, whose quiet strength grounded him, but Caleb's relentless pursuit stirred doubts. Was he running from his past, or toward a future he could trust? Sam proved his commitment daily. He'd show up with groceries, cook meals Elias craved, and sit through poetry readings, his camera capturing Elias's passion. One evening, at a park overlooking Puget Sound, Sam handed Elias a photo he'd taken, a candid of Elias laughing, sunlight catching his dreadlocks. "This is you," Sam said. "Not what anyone else says you are." Elias's throat tightened. Sam saw him, truly saw him, in a way Caleb never had. But the twins were a bridge to Caleb, one Elias couldn't burn. Caleb's tactics shifted. He stopped with gifts and started showing up at community events, charming mutual friends, painting himself as a changed man. At a bookstore reading, he sat in the back, his gaze heavy on Elias. Afterward, he approached, voice soft. "I'm trying, Elias. I want to be a father." Elias's heart raced, but he held firm. "You don't get to decide that now. You made your choice." Caleb's face fell, but his eyes burned with determination. "I'll prove it," he said, leaving Elias unsettled. The community began to split. Some saw Caleb's efforts as redemption. Others, like Jamie, called it manipulation. "He's playing the alpha card," Jamie warned, their blue hair catching the cafe's dim light. "He wants control, not you." Elias nodded, but the pressure was suffocating. Omegas were expected to yield to alphas, especially when children were involved. Elias refused to bend, but the weight of tradition and Caleb's scent tested him. One night, Elias's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the pier. Please." It was Caleb. Against his better judgment, Elias went, driven by a need for closure. The pier was quiet, the water lapping softly. Caleb stood alone, his flannel sleeves rolled up, his expression raw. "I was wrong," he said. "I was scared of what you made me feel. But I love you, Elias. I want us, our family." The words hit like a wave, stirring memories of their early days, when Caleb's laugh had been Elias's son. But Elias saw through it now. "You love the idea of me," he said, voice steady. "The Omega who fits your life. But I'm more than that." Caleb stepped closer, his scent overwhelming, but Elias held his ground. "I'm choosing myself. And my twins." He walked away, heart pounding, feeling lighter than he had in months. Back home, Sam was waiting, his eyes searching. Elias told him everything, expecting distance, but Sam pulled him close. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. Their kiss was soft, grounding, a promise of something real. But the victory was short-lived. Days later, Caleb showed up at Elias's apartment, drunk and desperate. "You can't keep them from me," he slurred, banging on the door. Elias, terrified, called Jamie, who arrived with a fierceness that sent Caleb stumbling away. But the encounter shook Elias. Caleb wasn't letting go. As his pregnancy progressed, Elias leaned on Sam and Jamie, building a chosen family. He started a blog, sharing his poetry and his journey as a pregnant Omega, finding a community online that celebrated his strength. But Caleb's presence lingered. He'd leave voicemails, alternating between apologies and demands. Elias blocked him, but the fear remained. Fear of what an alpha could claim, fear of losing control. At a prenatal checkup, the doctor warned Elias of complications. The twins were healthy, but his stress levels were high, risking early labor. Sam insisted he move into his loft, where they could face this together. Elias agreed, finding peace in Sam's cluttered space, filled with photos and warmth. They painted a nursery corner, choosing soft greens and yellows, a quiet rebellion against the chaos. But Caleb's obsession grew. One evening, as Elias and Sam walked home, a car followed them, its headlights too close. Elias's heart raced. He knew that car. "Caleb." Sam gripped his hand, pulling him into a crowded cafe. "We're getting a restraining order," Sam said, his voice firm. Elias nodded, but the fear lingered. Caleb wasn't just an alpha. He was a hunter, and Elias was his prey. Elias's life hung in a delicate balance, the twins' kicks a reminder of the future he was fighting for. At 7 months pregnant, his body was heavy, but his spirit was lighter, buoyed by Sam's unwavering support and Jamie's fierce loyalty. Seattle's summer wrapped them in warmth, but Caleb's shadow stretched long. The restraining order had been filed, but Elias knew paperwork couldn't tame an alpha's obsession. One morning, Elias woke to a package at Sam's loft. A baby blanket, soft and blue, with a note in Caleb's scrawl, "For our twins." Elias's hands shook as he burned the note, but the blanket stayed, a symbol of the battle he couldn't escape. Sam, sensing his unease, suggested a getaway. They drove to Olympic National Park, where the forest's quiet majesty soothed Elias's nerves. They hiked gently, Sam's camera capturing the way sunlight danced through the trees, Elias's smile tentative but real. "This is what I want for them," Elias said, touching his belly. "Peace." Sam nodded, his hand over Elias's. "We'll make it happen." But peace was fleeting. Back in Seattle, Caleb violated the restraining order, confronting Elias outside the bookstore. His eyes were wild, his voice low. "You can't shut me out. They're mine too." Elias's fear spiked, but Jamie, nearby, called the police. Caleb was arrested, his face a mask of rage and despair as he was led away. Elias trembled, Sam's arm around him, but the victory felt hollow. Caleb's words echoed, "They're mine too." Biology gave him a claim, one the law might honor. Elias's blog gained traction, his story resonating with Omegas and allies across the country. Messages poured in, praising his courage, but they also drew attention. A local news outlet picked up the story, framing it as a battle over Omega rights. Elias hated the spotlight, but it gave him a platform. He spoke at a community event, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I'm not just an Omega," he said. "I'm a person, a poet, a father. My twins deserve a world that sees them as more than their biology." The crowd cheered, Sam beaming in the front row, but Elias felt the weight of every word. As his due date neared, Elias faced a choice. Caleb's lawyer reached out, offering a deal, shared custody in exchange for dropping charges. Elias's gut churned. He wanted his twins free from Caleb's control, but the legal system favored alphas. Sam and Jamie urged him to fight, but the stress was taking a toll. At a checkup, the doctor warned of rising blood pressure. "You need calm, Elias," she said. That night, he and Sam sat on the loft's balcony, the city glittering below. "I'm scared," Elias admitted. Sam kissed his forehead. "You're not alone." The breaking point came unexpectedly. Caleb, released on bail, showed up at Sam's loft, sober and broken. "I'm letting go," he said through the door. "I thought I could fix this, but I'm hurting you. I'll sign away my rights." Elias didn't trust it, but Caleb's voice cracked with sincerity. Days later, papers arrived. Caleb had relinquished all claims to the twins. Elias wept, relief and disbelief crashing together. Sam held him, whispering, "You did this. You're free." The twins, a boy and a girl, arrived on a rainy August morning. Elias named them Maya and Jonah, their tiny faces a blend of hope and strength. Sam was there, cutting the cords, his eyes shining. Jamie threw a hospital party, blue hair glowing under fluorescent lights. Elias's heart swelled. He'd built a family, not through biology, but through love. Months later, Elias stood at a poetry reading, Maya and Jonah in a stroller beside him. He read a new poem, his voice clear. "I am not a toy, not a claim. I am the fire that names itself." The crowd roared, Sam's camera flashing. Caleb was a ghost now, his shadow gone. Elias had fought for his twins, for himself, and won. The story didn't end with a bond or a battle, but with a truth. Love wasn't possession. It was Sam's hand in his, Jamie's laughter, the twins' gurgles. It was Elias, whole at last, writing his own future under Seattle's endless sky.